we discovered that he had gone to Auschwitz with a lot of the Lederers, or a few that were shown to me, photographs and things, and survived with this, again, a kind of cliche that the doctor who was taking them one side or the other had come from Teplitz, which was where František came from, and that was enough to keep him. Also, I think the younger, fit people were kept, were more useful in the camps. But so I was in Auschwitz. It was a place I was never going to go, I can tell you, out of choice. And then we found newspaper clippings and records, and that's on camera. It's on camera that when I go, oh my God, there's a ledger right here. Then one thing leads to another, and then I end up meeting him. And even though the cameras are on, you sort of forget them. You just get on with it because it's so important.
Hello and welcome to Aspects of History. I'm the editor, Oliver Webb-Carter, and today's guest is Helen Lederer, actress, comedian, writer, and the author of Not That I'm Bitter, her life's memoir, which includes the 1980s comedy scene, and her family story during the Second World War, which we're going to talk about today. Coming up in the pod, we have Churchill, Allenbrook and Ismay, the triumvirate at the heart of government during the Second World War. We continue the special on the Wars of the Roses. We talk memorials around the country, and on the 80th anniversary of the end of the war, we discuss what that meant for the remnants of empire in India and the Far East. Please do subscribe or follow, and if you can leave a generous rating, I'd be much obliged. But until then, it's me talking with Helen Lederer on 80s comedy, the Holocaust, and a family of spies. Helen, welcome to Aspects of History's podcast. It's such a great pleasure and honor to have you on. Thank you.
Well, I'm delighted. I probably had to pay money, didn't I, to get myself on this? No, I'm thrilled. I like the website.
For listeners, no money exchanged hands here. I want to make that very clear.
Yeah, good.
But thank you. So it's just for the benefit of listeners. The reason why I've arranged this is because Helen, two reasons. First reason, has a fantastic book out called Not That I'm Bitter, which I want to delve into a little bit before we go into World War II, because that's the second reason, is World War II and your family connections, which are remarkable. They really are. So we're going to get onto that. It's very interesting. But for listeners who maybe are outside of the United Kingdom, which I have quite a few.
Oh,
Yes. So Helen is an actress and comedian, and you've been in loads of stuff, but I'm just trying to think what is Absolutely Fabulous is probably the biggest thing you've been in.
well, I think that's the program that people reference because for the reason that I think it was one of those iconic programs of that era. And there wasn't anything like it before or since. Just like, we might reference, I feel like I'm giving you a seminar, like we might reference the Monty Python as
Yeah.
being kind of unique. So I've learned through seeing and experiencing other people's enthusiasm for Ab Fab that it just chimed. It was there at the right time, and actually I'm told still speaks to younger generations now. So whatever Jennifer Saunders did, she did it correctly. And I did have a small part in that. There were five main characters that the producer John Plowman called the principals, and I obviously wasn't a principal. I don't think I was defined a peripheral because that probably would have been demeaning to actually label that. But I was lucky enough to be one of the dizzy journalists in the kind of spoof magazine at a time of PR, when PR was sort of getting recognized for being quite ridiculous and extreme. So I played a Sloane Ranger, which I don't think we have currently. I think they've been outlawed or put on an island somewhere for Sloane Rangers. They're not current, are they? Do you know?
No, I don't know what because they were quite big in the late 80s, early
Yes.
90s. Sort of cowboy boots walking along the King's Road.
Yes, pearls, of which I got trendy pearls on today, but pearls and cardigans basically.
Yeah.
Rich
Lady Di.
Lady Di, rich parents, probably a flat near Sloane Square, um, and doing some kind of useful work where you go somewhere with a handbag, sit there and do something, and then go home and have tea with your friends. That
And so your book, which I've been reading this morning, you've been involved in alternative comedy throughout the
yeah.
80s, really.
Yes, because that was the term. And I mean, alternative comedy to me means not men who play golf. And so the era before was probably, Bruce Forsyth, Jimmy Tarver. For some reason, they all shared a passion for golf. There's a kind of sweetness to it, really. I always think when you look back, life was probably quite uncomplicated. On the other hand, they did dominate the comedy canvas. And it took a while for women to sort of be part of it more routinely as they are now. And this was, yeah, the 80s. I mean, blooming heck. I mean, I was just writing about Tony Slattery, and we did a sketch show in '83. So I can't believe I've been alive that long and caring about comedy and being bitter and twisted and competitive for so many years. But I have been, and I'm cracking on. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's brilliant. I mean, because you've worked with all sorts. I mean, does it get quite annoying when people ask you about who you've worked with?
No, because that's the only way people can navigate your worth, unfortunately. And the whole thing about not that I'm bitter, I think, is I mean, I'm never going to do a memoir again, but I was there. And do you remember that film with Woody Allen? I think Zelig was it? It's just the person is just there. And there is interest in the fact that yes, I was on the set of a lot of the comedy programs of the time that people can remember, never with a huge part, but being part of it. So you get the leaders will do their memoirs, but because I'm not as well known as them, I have to be more honest. So I think in the Guardian review, when I did the interview with somebody, very clever, lovely journalist, you kind of get very self-conscious that their cleverness and how they're watching you put the kettle on. Are they going to write about it? Did I put it on in an ironic way? All that. But her conclusion was it's often more interesting, which suits me, to read a biography or a memoir from someone who is not as famous as all that. So I sort of try and I mean, I laugh at myself the whole time. Some people say that's wounding and alarming, but I do laugh at myself. I don't take myself seriously, but obviously there's a little bit of anger as well because I think as a comedian, as I was when I began, you are a bit of an outsider. But everyone's an outsider. The point is, if everyone's an outsider, then who's an inner? Do you know what I mean? You don't have anything
Yeah.
special. We all want to be special, don't we? But
Yeah.
I do observe people, and I do get quite angst-ridden. And I find that very funny, because I think what I observe is probably what other people observe. And a good comedian is going to reflect that with recognition in order to get the laugh, because you don't get the laugh if people don't recognize the content.
Also, there's the element of female comedians weren't that widespread in the 80s either, were they?
No, I don't know why. I wish. I think there was yeah, Victoria Wood was asked, what's it like to be a female comedian? And she said, well, I don't know what it's like to be a man. Obviously, that has more connotations nowadays. But, my thing was, I was where I was when I was doing what I wanted to do, and I jumped in. And I didn't jump in order to be seen as a woman and make a point, but maybe the required assertion in some ways of being a stand-up comedian where you write your own material, it is quite an assertive thing, and then you do want to be seen. So there's a lot of contradictions, but I didn't do it in order to wave a banner. I just did it because I knew I wanted to do it more than anything else in my whole life. And I think that's something quite good to reflect on, because a normal person would go, why on earth, why, oh, why would anyone in their right minds want to go to a room above a pub, get themselves there, do material, have people be mean and scrutinize you? And and then go home again on your own. I mean, why would you want to do that?
I cannot imagine. I mean, I've seen your stand up at the Comedy Store a few years ago now, actually, but
Ooh,
and it was brilliant. But I know it's
madness.
any stand up comedian, regardless of what level they are, the sheer balls to just get up and do
I
it. I
think
mean,
it's
if that's the
contra,
right
isn't it?
term.
It's like diving off a board, which I did do for a reality show.
Yes.
And that's an illogical thing. And then I do remember Tom Daly saying, he's an adrenaline junkie. So maybe you can, sometimes people need to feel alive. And to do that, my version of being alive is with anxiety. I mean, it would be nice not to be as anxious as I am. But if I don't do anything, I kind of get the itch. And I think I'd be more frightened of doing nothing than doing something that I find a bit difficult.
But you went to drama school.
Mhm.
Was that was it always a plan to
Mm.
do be a comic, or
Yeah.
did you right?
Well, I think the way I look at it is if you just go back to when you're at school and in your class, there's normally one or two people that tend to be the comedic, humorful individual. Maybe you were, Ollie, but yeah, I imagine you were quite dry. But I happened to be, well, there were two fat, we can't say fat, there were two large
We
people in
can. This is a completely
Okay, so fat. We're allowed to say fat.
yeah, yeah. You
Fat
can say whatever
meaning
you like on
not
this.
thin. Anyway, so there were two fat people in my class, but the other one, Pamela Kemp, wasn't funny, and I was. So I think it sort of goes. It's just a natural place for me to find things absurd and funny, and maybe I did accents a bit, not like an impressionist would, but so I was always doing it and always performing at home, forcing the poor parents to see a show. I just go, oh, people are coming around to play. Great. What we'll do is a play. And so I just, just generally, it was in my bones to do it. And yeah, it's a difficult one as a woman because you're brought up not to be boastful. And I was brought up not to be boastful as well. We had to write thank you letters and be quite polite. So there's lots of contradictions about claiming the stage. And then contradictions again with being a woman claiming the stage, which is largely occupied by men. But I don't
Yeah.
I don't get too dull about it, I hope, in the book, because the whole thing about Not That I'm Bitter, one, the title hopefully has irony in it. And two, it's packed with anecdotes that are true. Because I just think there's a law when you do a memoir that you have to tell the truth. I told so much truth. I didn't. I just thought I checked. I get very anxious if I think I'm lying. So it's very out there, but I'm told that people will just read an anecdote and and that's what's entertaining. Why would you write a book that does you I just wanted people to laugh, basically. But obviously that within that you can't shirk from the other stuff, otherwise it would be a disingenuine sort of piece of work.
Well, one bit that you wrote that I found very well, it's important is that there seemed to have been a quota, and we don't have to sort of dwell
Mm,
on this too long, but there did seem to be like a quota for female comedians, whereas there were loads of guys. I mean,
mm,
I could rattle off a whole load of names,
mm,
and that seemed to have been set. And but when you say you're not bitter in the title of the book,
mm.
of course, but you write about that in a way that doesn't sound bitter, although you
Well,
probably have every right to be.
That's interesting because other people have said, "Oh my goodness, I had no idea what you went through." And when I was writing it, that really wasn't the overarching thing. And also, being properly bitter is really unattractive. I mean, the whole thing about a comedian is you need people to like you. I'm always trying to make people like me. And obviously on the rare occasion when somebody doesn't, it's deeply upsetting. I always notice when I haven't got someone. I get most people, but there will always be someone I just don't get. They just not going to play. So yeah, but with the quota of women, yes, I mean it was unusual for women to write their own material and sort of take center stage literally. The Impressionists women got their own shows because they were doing impressions of other people. Singers got their own shows, but comedy people and indeed no chat show person at all. So it's a sort of reflection about how what we're all comfortable with as a society, isn't it? Are we allowing women to lead us? Because comedy is the one thing nobody can, really define. But you do have to buy into a leader person if you're going to laugh. That's the thing. I mean, people, and then people get so uptight about whether they like someone or whether they don't. I just think there's such a skill, even the golfers of their day, to get up and hold an audience for that time who've come to see you for an hour or more. It's amazing. I think I managed to, first of all, I started with a 5 minute, then a 10 minute, and then I did tour an hour. And the only way I could get through that, and I write about that in the book, is if the roadie would have put a bottle of wine on the back seat with some cheddars, and that kind of got cheddar cheeselet things, and I put on a stone in 3 months. But you know,
Did you
I
drink before or after? Do you need
after after
Right.
in those days after. Now when I do the literary festivals, being an old person, I sound like I'm a bit grand, and they say, oh, do you need any snacks in the green room? And I go, a glass of wine please. So now I go on with a glass of wine, it's in my hand. And some of these gigs have been in churches, and I just think, oh, is that allowed? But they have wine in a church, don't they, because of the
They do,
tropes,
yes,
what's
yes,
it.
absolutely.
Yeah. So, but yeah, so the quota were at the time I would go in with a script, and I discovered Doon McKinnon had from Slap the Pony had a similar experience. You just bit after me. We'd go in with our ideas or scripts, and they go, ah, no, because we got Dawn French is doing a female MP, damn, So because they were rightly championed, they're brilliant, but there was no thought there could be other similar people. Whereas, as you said earlier, Ollie, there was a list of men, and nobody thought to compare them. There just were more. So I think, but that is changing a lot now. You can't move for women comedians now.
No, and I know that I saw on your Instagram, which is very funny,
Mm, I
that you're
try.
doing the Rick Mail Comedy Festival. So you're still performing comedy.
Yes, I mean, I'm putting together a tour, which is I'm going to force myself to be brave again, get the old anxiety going. But the nice thing, I like having chats like with interested people like you, because it's your job to be interested. But I don't mind. I like people being interested, and then you get an interesting two-way conversation. But so I'm good at those. I love those because they're different every time, and the audience is different every time. And whether you've got 10 people, which has happened, or a few more, you make that unique to that group. It's really exciting. And the question's always different. But what I've got to do this year is just stand up on my own and do it without the prop of another individual. So that's what I'm going to make myself do. Yeah, I'm definitely going to do it again. So I might sort of go out with the trial one with Rick. I mean, it'd be great to do that at the Rick Mail Festival because he was one of the influencers and supporters of mine. I was lucky enough
Was he?
to
He was really a nice, because everyone says he's a nice guy, but everyone
really
always
nice.
says everyone's a nice guy.
They do. I mean, I'm nice. There's a few people
I can
probably.
confirm that for the
Yeah,
listeners.
but I can get it wrong. But then you think, in everyone's life, you'd look back and you go, yeah, I got that wrong. So there were a few regrettable moments, some of which are in the book. But yeah, Rick Mail I met on my second festival in Edinburgh and connected with him, shall we say. And he was very supportive and yeah, just such a unique person. And there are these unique people that stand out, and he was one. Yes.
Right. Well, we should probably move on because one of the reasons why we're speaking is that I attended an event at the Imperial War Museum, and there's a link into the piece where you very kindly escorted me and a few others around the Second World War exhibit that they had installed.
Yeah.
And there are a number of, I mean, it's quite interesting how closely, how many different
Mm.
aspects of the war that your family has. So,
Yeah, it was
um,
weird. It was a
yeah.
very weird thing to do. And thank you for attending the tour. I did feel like I should have a handkerchief that you waved. But anyway, it was quite an unusual situation, a mix of people. all of whom had chosen to be there, which is always a plus in any group. So the first exhibit we went to was the cabinet about the Home Guard. And the reason that we visited, the idea was that I would connect with some items and say my association with them, and then we get the backdrop of the history. So my grandfather came to this country from Czechoslovakia. I think he came in 39. They sent my father out earlier to boarding school here when he was a boy
In Margate?
in Margate, and he had for some reason, this is what we're told, they must have given him a uniform. It wasn't quite right or something. I think, how did that work? But anyway, and actually, I should have them here. I was going to read them out on the talk. We've actually got his letters home from the boarding school, and that's actually quite moving to read because just his sort of being brave, and then the minutiae of what it's like cricket and tennis, and just the nothingness is so, and you as a historian would know this, such a fascinating set of letters. But underpinning that is he had to come here. His sister was also at boarding school in Wales, and they had to get on with it and be brave. And all the teachers probably would have observed the letters and not really show their emotions and worry about what was happening in Czechoslovakia. And so there are detailed where he asks after they had a nanny, where was she? And so they must have known a fair amount of what was going on. But the Home Guard was my grandfather and my dad, because they were foreign, wouldn't have been, I think, allowed in the army.
Just a quick one, Helen.
Yes,
Sorry to
you
interrupt
may.
you, but so then your father came over here in 1938, presumably because of the annexation of Czechoslovakia then?
Yes, well, they sent him earlier. I think a lot of this is they predicted. The trick, I think, so many times is to predict what was happening. And for those people who didn't or didn't want to see it, which is understandable, they couldn't get out. So my grandfather, we learned, was an Anglophile anyway and had been over before the Second World War in England, and he had business contacts here. So I think they would have sent him, yeah, as you quite rightly say, it wasn't going to be safe if you were from a Jewish family at that time, and really leave the country. So they got him out earlier, a bit like the transport, but it was with an English teacher and two other boys.
Did
And
he talk about, did your dad talk about his time at the boarding school? Because coming from the Czechoslovakia,
mm,
and now he's playing cricket in a boarding
I
school in
know,
Margate.
in a uniform. He did talk about it a bit, and I think there's a bit in the book where when we were at school, there was a Norwegian girl who had come into our class, and my father was very insistent that I
It's
was
very touching,
friendly
that bit, actually.
was friendly with her. And then I got singled out by the teacher for being kind, and I was thinking, no, I'm just doing what my dad told me to do. So I think he had an awareness of what it was like to be from another culture with a different language. So yeah, it makes me sad when I think about it. But on the other hand, we all deal with stuff, and it was an amazing character, so it didn't hold him back at all, did not hold him back. He kind of had a very full life. But the Home Guard cabinet, my grandfather, Ernst Lederer, some people call him Arnost, Ernst. I go Ernst now. We called him Big Bubba, which is embarrassing. And he was on the Home Guard, and the bit of the story that we learnt about was that everyone thought he was in the Home Guard, including went off to the Heath to guard the Heath, Hampstead Heath, including his wife, when in fact, a lot of this time he took another route, went to Trent Park, where they invited German-speaking, largely Jewish refugees at that beginning, who would understand and speak German fluently, to hide at the bottom of this requisitioned house and bug the captured German generals at Trent Park, prisoners of war, upstairs, in order to find out layers of intelligence to help them win the war.
It
Sounds
must
kind
have
of
been.
so trite when I put it like that, doesn't it?
No,
It's
no, not at
very
all.
difficult to
I'm just
explain
thinking,
it.
but it must have been quite. I don't know if this is right or not, but quite satisfying for them to know that they were doing this whilst these
Mm.
German captured German generals are upstairs, stuffing their faces, thinking that. Uh,
Yeah, thinking they were being treated especially because they deserved it according to rank. Whereas, of course, the psychology behind it was we're treating you specially to take you off your guard in order to encourage, slips of content about the U-boats and about building possibly atomic weapons, heavy water. That there's evidence now that latterly has been discovered of what they found out in that way by treating them like kings. But I did a few years ago, I spoke to Eric Mark, who the wonderful Helen Fry knew. And his first thing when he talked about the Germans was how arrogant they were. And that's just coming. I mean, nowadays you don't say that about anyone. You just wouldn't go out with that kind of blanket term about anyone. But I'm just recalling what he said to me when I asked him about his experience. So it was a combination of their status and how they were being treated, that led the secret listeners to deduce what they did.
well, I'm unsurprised that senior German officers exhibited arrogance.
Mm,
And
mm. No, fair dues. But then, thinking about what the climate must have been like for these people, they couldn't leave. They were prisoners, and it would have been a hot house when we talked about the actual climate in there. It wouldn't have been happy clappy, even though, okay, they're not out there, risking their lives physically. Just being with other human beings like rats in a cage it requires its own survival, doesn't it? So it's fascinating, the whole concept of surveillance and what was gleaned, and the fact that I didn't know that that was what my grandfather did until a documentary for Channel 5 uncovered this fact for me rather cheerfully or otherwise. And so I've only been talking about it for the last few years. I had no idea.
I find that, yeah, this is the thing about the older generation that I admire, but at the same time, yeah, it's a little bit frustrating because you don't find out about this stuff. But
No.
and I'm also slightly heartened that these reality TV shows are genuinely real in this regard.
Yes. Well, this was, yeah, Channel 5 history, they had historians galore, and going through Czechoslovakia and Poland, there was yet another historian with their clipboard and their notes. And it was so researched. And I had no idea what the journey would be, but they did, a really small crew. And so we uncovered real evidence of what had happened to the Lederers, generation apart from me, with photographs and files and newspaper clippings and Lord knows what.
Were you aware? You must have been aware about that side of the family, the ones who remained in Czechoslovakia.
Not so much, but yeah, we did. We have like every family has their stories and their, Uncle Frank or that, but the climate at home was my grandmother, little Bubba, she didn't like talking about it, so we didn't really talk about the past. And they were so into being English and her bridge friends, and my grandmother was amazing. She'd go off and see Emmanuel in Tokyo with her friend Marianne Grunfeld in Golders Green, because it was quite shocking for me as a teenager to think of her doing that. But I think they kept themselves busy, you know. And with four granddaughters, that's also, she would watch things and say, "Oh, I thought you might be interested," or well, like Play for Today that we used to have in those days. But yeah, that so we knew that they weren't English, and we knew there was a cousin who ended up in East Germany called Werner, and we knew there was a Czech cousin called Valos who came over in between when it was free to come to England between the different occupations more latterly. And
But you would never visit the East
I
Czechoslovakia
did. I
period.
went to Russia as a 17-year-old schoolgirl, and my father was worried. slightly worried for me. I think there is that paranoia if people would know your name and stuff. I picked up, the fact that I'm quite a paranoid person as well. And if I'm in a restaurant, I think somebody's talking about me. I think I can hear them. So I've developed a kind of paranoid antennae of people being worried about things, but not really saying. You just would pick it up because, of course, they did have such a different life. On the other hand side, they have an amazing life because they appreciate the choices, compared to some people. So they're quite, yeah, active people.
In this TV show, correct me if I get this wrong, but you meet your cousin who you hadn't met before, and did
Yeah.
you even know he existed?
No, no, this was the first cousin of my father. And as I had said in the talk, it's quite emotional, like we have on the Channel 5 other programs now. It is because my father had died when I was quite young. And, you just go, oh my goodness, this is a relative. It was just a real person, it's a relative. But we discovered that he had gone to Auschwitz with a lot of the Lederers, or a few that were shown to me, photographs and things, and survived with this, again, a kind of cliche that the doctor who was taking them one side or the other had come from Teplitz, which was where František came from, and that was enough to keep him. Also, I think the younger, fit people were kept, were more useful in the camps. But so I was in Auschwitz. It was a place I was never going to go, I can tell you, out of choice. And then we found newspaper clippings and records, and that's on camera. It's on camera that when I go, oh my God, there's a Lederer here. Then one thing leads to another, and then I end up meeting him. And even though the cameras are on, you sort of forget them.
Oh, you do.
You just get on with it because it's so important. And yeah, I can remember it. It was just so real, but surreal as well. And then what do you do with that information as well? So it's I remember the director of the documentary saying it is quite a responsibility because it makes good TV, but then what do you do with these individuals who found each other? So there's a lot going on.
Yeah. Does the TV show sort of check in every so often,
No, although I
like a
was like,
duty of care?
I don't think they had duty of care in those days. I think that's quite a recent one, criteria. Tick that box. No, but the director did say this, and we did stay in touch with him. I mean, he's
You
passed,
have,
and I
right?
took my husband and my daughter to see him, and so we did keep in touch. But you can't. But what can you do? It's an odd one.
Yeah. Was there a language barrier a problem?
Oh, completely. Because I again, I wish I could speak Czech. I can sing a song in Czechoslovakia, which you might probably not want to hear. Please don't ask me. But we don't speak Czech. But I heard German being spoken in the home, but it wasn't a language we studied or were encouraged to study, which is such a shame because I think it's fantastic I'd love to speak German, I'd love to speak languages, but that it was a different time then.
Yeah, yeah. Well, one thing that we haven't also mentioned is your mother,
Hmm.
who we've been talking about, dad and grandpa, but
Mm.
your mum worked. They're all going off to do their thing during the war, but not telling
No,
each other what they're
a life
doing.
of secrecy. But so then we've done the Home Guard and all this. Then we go to the Enigma machine. And then I did make a mild joke saying, please don't ask me to tell you how it works. Because to this day, it's been explained to me about decoding and and thisy and thaty. I could try if I can only keep this information in my brain for a short period of time. Enigma machine. My mum was at university, and they invited her to go to Bletchley. And I think people went to university younger in those days.
But it's quite unusual for a woman to go to university at that
Yeah,
stage.
well, she was from the Isle of Wight, so a lot of people leave the Isle of Wight apparently. So she left to go to university. So there she was in Bletchley Park in Hut 6. And It's quite exciting place I'm sure you've been. It's an amazing place to go, Bletchley Park. And there's a brick with her name on it.
Yes, I've
Name.
seen a picture of you
Yeah.
pointing to it.
Yeah. They put the bricks there. But I think about the life that goes on in Bletchley Park. You've got a lot of people having a lot of sex. They're a lot of neurotic people, a lot of obsessive, and the hours they worked, the tasks they were given, are like a commune almost, choirs, plays, recitals, recreation. They're all living there, but overarching is the need to get their bit of information done. So Hut Six, I was taken to Hut Six, and they recreated it. But again, Secrets Act. People who signed the Secrets Act totally live by that. So although we knew she had been to Bletchley, it wasn't talked about. And she made two other women friends there, one of whom is my godmother. And they kept a friendship throughout their life, the three of them. I think I know they shared a flat after the war. And a lot of that narrative sounds really contemporary, doesn't it? Women in a working thing and then meeting up and then having the life of the single woman for a while and getting jobs in the Board of Trade where she then did. So, but Bletchley is a lot of films been made about Bletchley, understandably.
It's a fantastic story to have discovered it, for
Mm,
you to discover it so late as well. I
yeah.
mean, when I was growing up, all my father told me about was what my grandfather got up to during the war, which is far more mundane than your own backstory.
And
But
you're army though, aren't you? So they would be on the front line. I mean, they would have so much to tell.
yeah, they probably, yeah, my grandfather died in 1981, and
Mm.
but yes, he was in North Africa and Italy.
Mm. I mean, when you think about it, just so brave and doing huge things. I think I mean, this generation obviously haven't had to, unless they've chosen to join the forces. Very different time.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
certainly
I
is.
always think people are very brave, but then other people say in war you don't think like that. You do what you have to do.
Well, both things are true, I think.
Hmm.
Well, this is Helen. Thank you for sparing the time.
I loved it. Talking about myself. What's that like? Mentioning my book. Fantastic.
Yeah. The book, links will be in the show notes for listeners if they want to check that out, which they should. And so, what's next? Are you doing more talk? You got the paperback coming out. You were telling me before we were recording because,
Yeah.
you've adding in a new chapter.
Two new chapters. So the paperback is coming out on the 10th of April, and I'm describing from behind the scenes this TV series I'm on, which will be out at Easter. And I think that will be very interesting. That is a kind of another kind of posh reality show where you can actually talk about concepts every so often without being laughed at. So that I've written about that, and I had to get it cleared as well, which I didn't like. So I try and write so it's funny but truthful. But they've cleared it, so it's fine. And then I'm doing the epilogue about Tony Slattery. It's just an opportunity because that happened literally a few weeks ago. It's just an opportunity to be able to get that in the paperback and try and get, again, the humour, try and tell that story about Tony. It's just an opportunity to do it. So, yeah, that will be out on the 10th of April.
Well, Tony may be familiar to some from Whose Line Is It Anyway, where
Yes. Whose line
his
is it anyway?
his improv was just incredible.
I know. What's fascinating about Tony is that everyone noticed him, and he was a one-off, although he was part of the footlights. Everyone followed him, and then when he dipped away from his various issues, they still wanted to follow him when he came back and were fascinated. I think people were fascinated, but for me, just somebody that witty, that fast, that dangerous, that cruel, that delicious, yeah, very special. So yeah, I've put that in. We got up to some very bad stuff together, and so that's nice to be funny about one's
Bad as in naughty.
very bad. And Yes. And so it's good to have that documented, I think.
Great stuff. Well, Helen, thanks again, and best of luck with the paperback
Thank you.
and with
And
the touring.
I'll just be tuning in to aspects of history for the rest of my life now.
You must do that. That is the
Issue
one
free
thing.
gifts.
Yeah.
That's your next thing. Merchandise. Let's get some
Yes.
merch going.
Tote bags, I've been told.
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks so much for listening. Please do follow or subscribe and give a kind review if you can. But in the meantime, thank you and good night.